Hi, welcome to EdgeWave Cybersecurity webinar series. I'm Chu Kim Iskit, and I want to just do a quick introduction for you. As a quick reminder, all participants are on mute until the Q&A session. If you have questions during the presentation portion, please feel free to use the question feature in our webinar, and I'll be able to answer some of those questions or defer to the Q&A section of the presentation. Today we'll be covering a few things, as you know from our short abstract about the webinar. We'll be covering common predictions and security threats and how they're critical to business IT professionals today. So you'll get to see kind of what the current trends are in cybersecurity. New regulatory requirements. I think there's questions around a specific big one that's coming down from Europe that we'll be talking about as well for customer information and privacy. And then recommendations for strengthening an organization's security posture. Today, the presenter will be Dawn Lewis, who's our Security Marketing Manager. Dawn brings us over 15 years of cybersecurity and software experience, specifically around product management, product marketing, and really be sharing with us some insights that we've pulled together for you guys today, both from an external perspective with other known and reputable sources, as well as our own data to share today. Now I'll send it over to Dawn.
Okay, thank you, Chu. Appreciate that. Thanks to everybody for joining. We're going to start off. We like to have audience participation, so I'd like to ask you a poll question here. So give me one moment while I launch the poll question. You can see that on the screen, so you'll know what we want to ask you about. So how many IT security projects do you anticipate for 2018? For example, a cloud data migration project, maybe a new ERP system rollout, maybe mobile device management rollout to support mobile devices, or to allow for bring your own device policies, anti-malware security vendor swap across your endpoints. Maybe you're standing up a network operations center or security operations center. So take a moment to answer, and then I'll share the results with everyone in a moment. Okay, we'll just give it another minute here, and we'll close the poll. So if you haven't answered yet, please take a moment to do so. Let me know how many projects you anticipate working on in 2018. Okay, I think everyone's, let's go ahead and share the results. Okay, so yeah, as we can see, most folks have less than 10, but although kudos to you that have the 12% that said you've got more than 10 projects next year. Obviously, big projects take a lot of time, so we can appreciate that. And of course, with all of these, security is at the heart of every project you're working on. So let's continue with the presentation. Okay, so again, we kind of looked at some external sources as well as some internal data. And so one of them I wanted to call out. So Gil Press is a Forbes contributor and cybersecurity consultant, and he recently authored a story with 60 predictions for 2018. But he summarized it this way: like death and taxes, there are only 2 safe predictions about cybersecurity next year. More spectacular data breaches, and then of course the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, will go into effect in May. He goes on to say, as the continuing digital transformation of our lives entails the ongoing digital transformation of crime, vandalism, and warfare, 2018 could also bring a lot of new takes on old vulnerabilities, some completely new types of cyber attacks, and successful new defenses. And so you can read the details of his 60 predictions on the Forbes website. So now let me ask you, what keeps you up at night? Are some of those initiatives that you said you're working on intended to solve malware issues such as ransomware, phishing, and spam? Are you writing new policies for preventing or managing data breaches? Are you planning how to deal with employee usage of mobile devices on your corporate network, or analyzing the risks of a possible IoT, Internet of Things attack? Are you writing new procedures for vetting the security of the vendors you work with? Are you trying to hire and maintain qualified IT personnel? Are you working on updates to ensure you pass an audit and remain compliant with regulations? Maybe you're implementing new solutions for backup and recovery, or moving to the cloud for redundancy and added capabilities. And then finally, how about rolling out training programs to deal with employee errors related to internet and email usage that could impact operations or lead to a data breach? But again, in all cases, security is a key factor in all of these things that you might be working on. So I wanted to kind of give you kind of our take on top 10 cybersecurity predictions. In preparing for this webinar, I researched several outlets such as Gartner, Forbes, and IT Security Central. And while the predictions cite different subject matter experts in the industry, there appeared to be significant overlap and some common themes. So the first one is we also believe the data breaches of major brands will continue to occur, and perhaps even organizations associated with critical infrastructure such as power, water, aviation, manufacturing. You've probably heard stories in the news that hackers, nation state type of scenario, may try to go after our national infrastructure. And of course, this is in part why the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has been working with government, business, and education communities since 2014 to develop the cybersecurity framework to help provide strategic direction and a roadmap for organizational planning, and to apply the principles and best practice of risk management to help improve the security and resilience of critical infrastructure. The second thing for hackers, ransomware is the new black, and that's because ransomware is easy money and will continue to grow. Ransomware attacks will continue to expand because many people fail to patch their systems as needed. But with so many great tools, this is easy to fix with a little automation and education. Also, phishing will also continue to rise as compared to general spam campaigns. Phishing has proven more effective because it often bypasses spam filters, and it relies on social engineering, playing on human vulnerabilities when opening emails and clicking on web links. Number three, we'll also see a major switch from hacking computers to more hacking of smartphones. With each year, we see a significant increase in the amount of personal and business data we have on our phones. So I believe this leads to hackers changing their priorities and going after smartphones and other mobile devices. In fact, at this year's DEF CON event, an exploit was found that potentially can compromise the hardware of over 1 million cell phones, and this was projected to linger for a year or more. Number four, we would expect to see a new Internet of Things, IoT botnet attacks, especially against home automation and AI assistants such as the Amazon Echo, Apple HomeKit, and Google Home. Attacks will be aimed at the automation communications layer, Z-Wave and Zigbee-enabled devices, and these things control such things as your home locks, your garage door openers, your video surveillance systems, lights, TVs, and so on. So we believe that those will become targets. And for businesses, Gartner estimates that about 25% of enterprise attacks over the next 3 years will target IoT devices. But they also say that IoT protection currently only makes up about 10% of most IT security budgets. Number five, just as security vendors are increasingly using automated intelligence, AI, as part of their solution to help predict and stop cyber threats before they occur, hackers will increasingly turn to AI also to do their dirty deeds, such as more effective spam campaigns, targeting, and automation of ransomware campaigns to be able to deploy them and collect the ransoms quicker. Number six, businesses will scramble to meet the General Data Protection Regulation. This is an EU regulation that applies to every country in the world. Companies are expected to be compliant by May of 2018. and so we'll talk a little bit more about this in a further slide. Number 7, vendor security will also become critical. As you've seen from previous major data breaches, such as the Target breach, most of them are caused by third-party negligence or not minding the store, basically. So vendor security should seek to weed out vendors with bad security practices, and specifically the GDPR will require companies to do a deeper vendor security due diligence ever than before. As many of the vendors in this space are currently just modified vulnerability scanners, we believe that enterprises will search for other ways, efficient and affordable human auditors to carry out some of the work and to embrace new industry-led standards. But the idea is that passing vendor due diligence will become more critical for technology purchases rather than an afterthought. Number 8, a shortage of IT professionals with security experience and expertise will also be a factor. The current shortage of IT professionals trained to address things like ransomware and cybersecurity, as well as emerging initiatives such as the Internet of Things, connectivity, and mobile access is apparent. Again, I'll cover this a little bit more in a further slide. Number 9, IT service providers will successfully penetrate the SMB market with much needed cybersecurity services because the SMB community is realizing that they're just as vulnerable to cyber attacks as the enterprises are. It affects everybody. So the need to monitor, detect, remediate, and report on internal and external vulnerabilities will drive SMB adoption of cybersecurity services. I think we'll also see a greater convergence of cloud services for the individual business, and more traditional IT will be overtaken by cloud-based services and on-demand services. SaaS, software as a service, will become the new norm, as it already has started to. Everything from Office software, your anti-malware, and soon operating systems. Prime example is Windows 10. And then lastly, there will be more options for cybersecurity insurance. If you hadn't heard of this, cybersecurity insurance has been around for a few years, and it's been offered by a handful of insurers. But with the increase in the number and severity of data breaches, more insurers will get into the market and more companies will take out a policy, knowing that it's not a matter of if, but when. And so cybersecurity policies help companies with investigations, remediations, and covering financial losses due to fines, operational cleanup costs, and other unplanned expenses that otherwise might put them out of business. So that would kick in if they do have a data breach. So organizations are going to start to see security as a key commercial risk rather than simply an IT issue that affects all parts of the business. Okay, so now I'd like to move to a second poll question. So we're talking about security, and I'm curious to know how much time you spend managing security issues and all the various IT tasks that you're responsible for. So let me launch this poll real quick, and I'd love to get your feedback. How much time do you spend managing security issues? Less than 10%, between 10 and 20, 20 and 30, 30 and 40, or over 40% of your total time? Just give it another minute here, and then we'll share the results. Okay, looks like folks are still voting. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll question now, and let me share the response with you. Okay, so it looks like 40% of you said between 10 and 20%, 28% between 20 and 30. 10% between 30 and 40, and wow, so 3% of you are spending over 40% of your time on security. Obviously, it's an important thing, and we have to get it right. So it's interesting results. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so at the root of all these cyber attacks device vulnerabilities, and even industry compliance requirements is the fact that web and email attack vectors are still the primary method of a data breach. Here are some stats from the 2017 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. They put that out every year. So as you can see, 62% of breaches were as a result of hacking. 51% of those included malware. And speaking of malware, 66% of malware came from malicious email attachments. 81% of hacking-related breaches were successful because they stole or were able to hack weak passwords. And then 43% were based on social attacks. So let's dig a little bit deeper specifically into the email and web threats. This kind of relates to our top 10 list. So I mentioned that ransomware and phishing would be on the rise, continue to be a problem in 2018. In the 2017 ransomware report put out by the Cybersecurity Insiders, 51% of surveyed IT pros felt slightly to moderately confident in their current organizational defenses to stop ransomware. 56% weren't confident in their organization's ability to resolve a ransomware attack, and another 52% also cited budget as a deterrent. So here are some things to consider as you review and update your security for 2018. Just you want to patch your systems, to opt in, monitor the product feeds from your vendors to find out when the patches are available, and set aside time on a weekly basis to do that. You should also implement an email and file archiving solution as a means to back up your data. That way, if your files are missing, you still have access to them without having to pay the ransom. You should review your current policy for managing your archives to make sure that you know what you can retrieve, when you can retrieve it, how you can retrieve it. And then finally, you want to educate your end users into what ransomware is. So if they see a suspicious email that could lead to a ransomware attack, they would know what to do about it. Phishing as well. Phishing we expect to be on the rise. From the Anti-Phishing Working Group's report published earlier this year, they reported that attacks have grown more than 5,700% since they've been tracking it in 2004. And specifically, it's 1.2 million total phishing attacks reported last year, and that was a 65% increase year over year. And they also reported that it takes 46% reported it takes a day or longer to remove a phishing email if it infects their organization. Of course, credential phishing is one of the ways that would lead to stolen passwords. And so with the increased usage of cloud services such as Dropbox, Box, Google Docs, OneDrive to share documents and collaborate, there's a potential for users to be tricked into giving up the passwords. So again, recommendations: you want to implement a robust email gateway solution to help catch a lot of the phishing attempts. And reporting within your email security solution should include details on the emails blocked due to phishing, so you can accurately assess the threat specific to your organization and develop a proper response. Many organizations find that additional employee cybersecurity training creates an organizational-wide awareness and increased alertness for emails that find their way to the employee's inbox. And I'm also going to share details of a new anti-phishing solution from EdgeWave later on in the presentation. Also, talking about phishing, there will continue to be an increased focus in individually targeted attacks. Employees are your weakest link. Hopefully that you would know that or believe that. 99% of threats need human interaction to be successful. For example, credential phishing requires forms to be filled out. Malware links require users to save or execute a file. Attachments with macros require the user to enable them. And then embedded files need to be clicked and accepted. And spear phishing emails, business email compromise, BEC attacks, are completely human focused. And those are sophisticated scam targeting businesses working with suppliers, usually to do with wire transfer payments. It was formerly known as man-in-the-middle scams. The idea is that they try to compromise official business email accounts to conduct unauthorized fund transfers. The FBI has said victims lost nearly $750 million and affected more than 7,000 people over the last several years. And globally, cyber criminals scam more than $50 million from victims in non-U.S. countries. These are things like bogus invoice fraud, CEO fraud, account compromise, attorney compromise, and data theft of personally identifiable information, or PII. So with ever-changing and clever phishing schemes that are out there, it's not always possible for employees to be trained in the latest threats. However, our tip is to provide reoccurring training and share phishing examples with them, and again, provide tools to help them report phishing, and I'll give you details of EdgeWave's new solution later on. So our third and final poll question, we want to find out what percentage of unwanted emails does your organization get per year? So let me launch this final question. So let me know, do you think the unwanted emails, this could be spam, junk, phishing, malware related, what percentage of emails do you get, do you think, per year? Is it less than 10%, between 10 and 20, 20 and 30, 30 and 50, or over 50? Okay, just give it another moment here, and then we'll share the polling results. Okay. Okay, let me go ahead and share the results. And wow, we have a good mix of responses there. 18% of you said less than 10%, but yet 16% of you said over 50% of your emails were unwanted. So that's definitely interesting statistics. So thank you for providing that. So based on EdgeWave's own data, would you believe that some organizations get up to 61% of unwanted emails? Again, this includes spam, junk, malware, or phishing. From the EdgeWave Security Labs, in looking at sample data from mid-sized businesses across the U.S. in 6 key vertical markets, email traffic varies, but the potential impact is still the same. Based on our data from 2017, and I ran a report from January through November of this year, we found that between 27% and 57% of emails received were spam or junk. Malicious emails range from as low as 1% up to 32%. And while these percentages may sound low, when you look at the actual email volume, this could be millions of emails unwanted or malicious. And the reality is it only takes one malicious email. So let's look at the actual numbers. 2.5 million spam messages, 270,000 malicious in financial services, 2.4 million spam messages, and 287,000 in manufacturing, and 218,000 in service providers, and 24,000 malicious, 2.8 million spam, and almost 500,000 malicious in education and government, 2.7 million spam, and 2 million malicious. And this is interesting because 98% of the malicious emails that we caught on behalf of our government customers were actually botnets. And then finally, 2.1 million spam, 148,000 malicious in healthcare. So then let's move from email to the web threats. And again, malicious domains are on the rise. So currently there's over about 339 million domains globally. 50% of these are what are known as country code top level domains, CC, and these would be like .jp for Japan, or .fr for France, or .it for Italy. And so many of these can be associated or used for malicious intent, so that's kind of interesting to know. But according to an anti-phishing working group, again, over 277,000 phishing sites were detected last year in Q4, and that represents a 28% increase year over year. But if you look at the number of domains specifically registered for malicious purposes, that grew 3x between 2015 and 16. So if we look at the 277,000, roughly 30,000 the previous year grew to 90,000 sites that were specifically registered for malicious purposes. So the pie chart is basically showing that in a little more depth, where of all the domains that were used for phishing, 49% of them were specifically registered for that purpose, and of those, 55% were Chinese domains, and then the other 51% were simply legitimate domains that somehow got compromised. And looking specifically at the malicious domains, 75% of the registrations were in 4 top-level domains such as .com, .cc, .pw, and .tk, but then more than 90% were found in a total of 14 domains such as .info and other country codes like .cn for China, .ml for Malaysia, or .be for Venezuela. So these are things just to be aware of, that more folks are registering domains overseas and using them for malicious purposes. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that cyber squatting cases rose by 10%, and this is based on data from the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, and they help to police the internet. So cyber squatting is also known as domain squatting, and that's where they're registering, trafficking in, or using an internet domain name with bad faith intent to profit from the goodwill of an existing trademark that belongs to someone else. So a 10% increase in complaints. I mean, this is also a trend, you know, because cyber criminals are using these domains to appear legitimate to individuals who are then trying to trick them with malicious intent. So it's appearing to come from the legitimate brand, but it's actually not, because it's registered, it's being used for malicious purposes. So each year, EdgeWave's iGuard team scours the web for new URLs, scanning websites through both automation and human security analyst review, and we classify these sites by category, and then we update our iPrism web security product with this data. We track to over 1,000 granular categories and have classified over 1.1 million new sites year to date. But here are the top categories of new websites per our 2017 data. So as you can see, business and professional sites represent over 50% of new websites, and that's legitimate websites that exist for businesses to be found and to conduct e-commerce and so forth. And not that any of these could not be a conduit for malicious activity if compromised. So majority of these are most likely legitimate. So the fact whether they would be compromised or not really depends on the security of the organization and what solutions they have in place to protect their website, as well as that of their internet service provider and the monitoring that they do on their behalf. Many of the other listed categories, such as pornography, social networking, gambling, and questionable copyright infringement or illegal, are typically known for harboring malware. So it's interesting that they make the board of sites, pornography and adult sites representing 5.42% of new sites, gambling about 1%, copyright infringement in illegal sites almost 2%. So when we can find and categorize these sites, then that makes our web security product more effective at blocking unwanted sites and provides more effective reporting. So I mentioned a couple times the industry compliance. So the new thing for 2018 is the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. At first, I want to start off with to share from a recent Veritas survey. They surveyed more than 2,500 senior technology decision makers, and 40% of businesses are fearful of a major compliance failing, and an additional 31% are worried about reputational damage from poor data policies. So let's dig into what the GDPR is about. First, it covers consent and accountability, reporting security breaches, and identifying and handling of high-risk data. It applies to organizations located within the European Union, but it also applies to organizations located outside of the EU if they offer goods or services or monitor the behavior of EU residents. So it applies to companies processing and holding the personal data of subjects living in the EU, regardless of that vendor's location. So information such as anything that could be used to directly or indirectly identify the person. It could be a name, a photo, an email address, bank details, posts on social networking websites, medical information, or even a computer IP address. And I was looking at some of the guidelines. Microsoft had mentioned that users must be trained to handle data in appropriate ways. Security must protect the data. Compliance must ensure the controls are in place. And IT needs to implement and manage the systems properly. But it all starts with businesses setting up proper policies and objectives. But again, the penalties for non-compliance after May 2018, it said that organizations can be fined up to 4% of annual global turnover if they're found in breach of this regulation. So again, our general recommendations are use multiple layers to safeguard against web and email threats. Ensure your corporate communications include data loss protection or data leak protection, DLP, to prevent sensitive data from leaking out of your organization. You want to implement message and file encryption. And then again, you want to train employees on better data handling. And then I also mentioned a shortage of IT security professionals. And this may be due to a lack of financial, staffing, and technology resources, where organizations don't have the budget to hire new people, or they can't find the right people. There's also a trend that workers are retiring, so there could be seasoned IT professionals that are retiring. Maybe they set up, the existing systems, on-premise systems, very sophisticated, maybe databases and so forth. But as organizations move to the cloud, they're trying to find that continuity, and sometimes when workers retire and new workers come in, there's a chance that expert knowledge isn't always, that organizational knowledge isn't always transferable. And the organizations lose out when they don't have the ability to staff with the right people with the right skills. And then finally, security expertise is lacking. Gartner recent study had mentioned that up to 3.5 million IT security jobs would be unfilled by 2021. And that's where there's stories and where government agencies and business leaders are encouraged to partner together to recruit more young IT professionals. Universities will probably need to expand their curriculum as data governance and AI technologies are more embedded into the fabric of our society. Corporations and governments around the world are going to vie for the top IT talent. So I guess for college students, the labor shortage is good news to those who are inclined towards IT. So it's just a matter of finding the right people and training them and making sure they're aware of the job opportunities. But even if there is a shortage of IT, if employees are your weakest link, you should train your employees in cybersecurity awareness, and that will help you with your overall posture. Again, give them tools to self-report and self-manage issues to help minimize the workload impact and the workload of the IT staff that you have. So just wanted to kind of do a recap about EdgeWave. Basically we have a suite of products that provides comprehensive security, multiple layers to protect businesses from these web and email-borne threats that I've mentioned today. Everything from URL filtering and blocking, malware scanning, automated and human analyst review of emerging email threats, gateway email spam scanning, encryption and data loss prevention monitoring across emails. We offer web security, email security, secure email and file archiving solution, secure content sharing, and a new anti-phishing solution, which I mentioned I talked about earlier. And so I wanted to introduce Threat Test. This is an automated threat detection and response service. It will be generally available after December 15th of this year. and it basically helps stop phishing attacks at the endpoint. It's an automated response service that empowers employees to report suspicious emails directly to EdgeWave from a button in their email inbox. So we quarantine the email and deliver a real-time analysis of it, and then a response back to the end user. And then we also report this globally for the IT staff to review in centralized reports and charts. So this solution saves IT time in researching possible phishing attempts and helping them to remediate it when these phishing attempts reach the end users. And I believe it also helps to reinforce any investment in your organization that your organization has made with cybersecurity awareness training. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chu. But if there's any questions of any of these products, if you're not an EdgeWave customer and you're interested in learning more about our solutions, there's a link to request a demo, get a consultation. And then our January webinar, what we want to cover is how to realize ROI in your security investments. We want to give a template for kind of a framework of things to consider when you're looking to implement technology solutions to determine how will you know if those solutions are effective or not. Chu?
Great, thanks, Don. So I will open this up now to the Q&A portion of the presentation. Feel free to use the question feature to ask any questions that you have, and I'll just give a moment to get some additional questions in, and then we'll start with Q&A. Again, I believe I sent this out through the chat portion, but the recorded webinar will be available for attendees as a follow-up, so you should get that in the next 24 to 48 hours so you can review it again, share with your team, the organization, with your family, friends, neighbors. So feel free to use the question feature if you have any questions, and let me just wait to see if we have questions coming in. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a knocking at the door. Some construction at our facility here. Okay, we've got one question coming in, and I will direct this to Don. Don, you mentioned security awareness training. Is there any additional insight you can provide, and is EdgeWave a security awareness program or product?
Yeah, so we don't provide direct security awareness training. There's other vendors that provide that in a simulated environment, so they can help the IT departments validate the behaviors of employees when they're interacting with emails, and kind of report that back to help that guide their scenario-based training, help guide their policies, and help reinforce the employee's email usage. But our new solution I mentioned called Threat Test complements that. So some of you that if you're an existing EdgeWave customer or had attended last month's webinar, you'll have seen something called Threat Check. That was the beta version of this product, so the generally available version is called Threat Test. It'll be rolled out December 15th, but again, that solution gives that tool that I mentioned directly to the end users. And one of our beta customers who gets a high percentage of spam and phishing emails had actually gave us detailed information that said, and they are also subscribing to a security awareness training solution, and they said that our new anti-phishing tool at the inbox is helping to specifically reinforce their investment in that tool, because the tool is a training tool. They can test it, they can prepare them, but then in a real world scenario, by the employees reporting phishing emails back to EdgeWave, we're remediating it, removing it from the inbox, and then that IT manager can see the reporting, the behavior of all the employees that are responding, reporting emails. That helps validate everything that they have tried to teach him with the cybersecurity awareness training solution that they also had implemented. So it's definitely a good complement to that.
Another question, do you have to be an ePrism customer to use threat test?
You can currently, if you're an ePrism customer, you can quickly get on board with that today. As we move into Q1, the product rollout, the roadmap will include support for other solutions. So currently it's ePrism customer. If you're using our email security solution, in 2018, you'll see the expansion of this solution quite rapidly. So stay tuned for more news about that.
Right, and I'll just add to that in January timeframe we'll have a standalone version, so it's not relying on being an ePrism customer. It's vendor agnostic as it relates to email security vendor. So, oh, hold on, someone. There we go. If you do not know how to access the question panel, you can see on the right column that there is where it says questions. You can expand that, and then you can type in the question for anyone to use, just in case you need to be reminded that that's where the question can be asked. There's a question around, are there plans to be more active in the German market, so more international presence for web and email security? That's actually a discussion point that we have now through some partnerships and other development that we are having. And so for that individual, I'd be happy to follow up with them individually to share more on that. The button on Outlook to report phishing email, how do we install it? Is it compatible with Outlook 2010? Yes, it is. And actually, Scott Hardison, our senior sales engineer, has also joined us, and he can actually share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the plugin is installed for Outlook. It supports Outlook 2010, 2013, 2016. The plugin is installed one of two ways. There's an executable that can be run for an individual machine, and it's also available in an MSI version for installing across large groups. So you can deploy it via any software deployment tools via Active Directory as well. So either way is available. It's a very quick install, puts a button onto the home page ribbon within Outlook. So it's there for the users, and then any suspicious looking email that they have, if they would like to report, they simply click the button and submit it, and they'll get their responses back acknowledging that it's been submitted and is being reviewed, and then they'll get a final analysis message as well regarding the outcome of that analysis.
Great. Ooh, good question, Tom. Are you addressing the DFARS DSS U.S. government directive to come into effect on December 31st? DFARS NIST 800-171 compliance.
Okay.
Don, you want to?
Yeah, I believe that has to do with, I think I just read about that the other day. That has to do with, I think it has to do with the the level of classification of information. So if you're doing business with the federal government, then there's a new compliance that you need to be, and I can follow up with him individually. But yeah, it has to do with the classification of information and how to manage that.
So that's under research, Tom, and we will follow up with you directly so you can get some feedback on that. Oh, hold on. No, it's for unclassified information. Yeah. Sorry, unclassified information. Thanks. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you all for joining our webinar today. As you saw from the end slide here, we will be talking about how to realize ROI for your security investment on the next one. Please join us again for our cybersecurity webinar series. This is recorded, and we will share that recorded webinar with you by our lovely marketing manager, Megan. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to having you on the next one.